Let's begin with another dizzying day in Washington, dominated by Donald Trump's threats of a trade war with Mexico after the Mexican president cancelled his visit to Washington next week. Mexico is refusing, of course, to pay for the wall that Donald Trump wants built along America's southern border. But President Trump says one way or another the Mexicans will pay for the barrier's construction, even if the US has to levy a 20% tax on imports from Mexico. This is increasingly the new president's modus operandi, backing his friends, picking noisy fights with those he doesn't regard so warmly. On top of that, a White House advisor to the president called the news media the opposition party in the US. And the British Prime Minister Theresa May has carefully stepped into the whirlwind torture very much on the agenda there. Our Washington correspondent Simon Marks has been looking at another incredible day.
6 days into President Trump's administration and the US suddenly finds itself on the skids with Mexico. 24 hours after the president signed executive orders to kickstart the construction of the wall he wants to build.
A nation without borders is not a nation.
The Mexican president, Enrique Peña Nieto, said he won't travel next week to Washington for scheduled Oval Office talks. The US president, speaking to Republican members of Congress gathered at a retreat in Philadelphia, tried to portray the whole thing as a mutual decision.
The president of Mexico and myself have agreed to cancel our planned meeting scheduled for next week. Unless Mexico is going to treat the United States fairly, with respect, such a meeting would be fruitless.
But that may prove to be one of the alternative facts in which this White House likes to traffic, just like the suggestion, widely shared with reporters, that the president planned to impose a 20% tariff on imports from Mexico, a construct that White House spokesman Sean Spicer indicated would satisfy President Trump's promise to get Mexico to pay for the wall.
By doing it that way, we can do $10 billion a year and easily pay for the wall just through that mechanism alone.
But as analyst after analyst pointed out that a 20% tax would simply lead the Mexicans to raise their prices, it dawned on the White House that it would be American customers who buy Mexican avocados, limes, tequila, and automotive parts who would in reality end up paying for the wall. So now the White House says it was just floating the idea. It is not, apparently, US policy. In other news, Donald Trump's top advisor, presidential counselor Stephen Bannon, gave an inflammatory interview to the New York Times. He called the news media the opposition party in America, and despite the First Amendment to the US Constitution that guarantees the right to free speech, he decreed that reporters should keep their mouths shut. That led CNN anchor Jake Tapper to bring this news flash to the network's viewers.
A reminder that the president's top aide just told the New York Times that the press should keep its mouth shut. No.
Into this whirlwind, the British Prime Minister Theresa May has flown. On Friday morning, she will become the first foreign leader to meet Donald Trump in the White House and then hold a joint news conference with him. She wants him to prioritise a bilateral trade deal between the US and a UK poised to leave the European Union. The good news for her, he's willing to do it. The bad news, well, he delivered that himself to Republicans in Philadelphia.
There'll be one-on-one deals. And if that particular country doesn't treat us fairly, we send them a 30-day termination, notice of termination. And then they'll come and say, please don't do that, and we'll negotiate a better deal during that 30-day period. The other way, you can't get out of it. It's like quicksand.
Given the pace of events here, it is a brave foreign leader who agrees to meet President Trump, especially in light of a TV interview in which he expressed admiration for torture and reports circulating that suggest the White House is now preparing to lift sanctions against Russia. For Mrs. May and other governments interacting with the Trump administration, there is the potential for reward, but there is also substantial risk as well. For Checkpoint, I'm Simon Marks in Washington.